happy Labor Day weekend. So, you guys saw this thumbnail. Sold. Unfortunately, it is sold. Yeah. But let me clear that up. I sold the wheels. I did not sell the car. I thought about selling the car, but with this market, with the interest rates that we have today and what car values are, there's no way I'm selling this car. I bought this car before the values went crazy, and the car continues to appreciate, and I love driving it, and it's in perfect condition. So there's no reason to sell this car. I did sell the wheels. The wheels went to a good home. They went to a local friend of mine that I've met recently that we had interacted on social media a couple times. And he watches my YouTube and Instagram stuff, and he's local and I didn't know. So I met him, really nice guy, and he actually wanted to buy my wheels months ago. And at that point, I didn't really want to sell them. I thought about it, but I didn't. But, you know, I think the time came where I needed money more than I needed wheels. If you guys have been following me, you know I'm, pun intended, I'm chasing a flight path. And that costs money to do all this training. And so I like these wheels equally as much as I liked the BBS CHRs. So I decided to let go of the BBS CHRs. I think these wheels on this car give it that classic nostalgic look. This BBS, the CHRs that were on here, yes, they're much more photogenic and they do look really good, and they give it more of a bit of a modern, more GT style. But I don't think this is diminished by any way by having these wheels versus the other ones. I think the car looks just as good. And it, you know, for as far as classic looks, I think it actually looks a little bit better with these wheels. One thing I will miss with the BBS CHRs though, they are perfectly balanced and the perfect width. I mean, the offset was so perfect. You didn't need any spacers, and they were balanced so well. Those are wheels that I've balanced on the car and never really had to get them rebalanced. They rode so nicely. So I'll miss the BBS the CHR wheels, but you will probably see them in the future because we've talked about doing drives, and so you'll see it in future videos on the other car. The guy who bought them, he's got almost a twin of this car. He's got a Targa 4S. This is just the Carrera 4S. So he has the Targa, but he has a lot of the extras. He's got the full leather package. He's got, it's a manual, which is phenomenal. And it's got a lot of extra goodies. We'll do, one day we'll shoot a review of his car once he installs the wheels on his car. But they went to a good home, so I'm happy. And, you know, I got a little bit of money for it, so I can't complain. Future things we're gonna do with this car. I thought about something, and this is something I learned recently I was trying to read information on a forum about something transmission related or something. Anyways, I stumbled upon something, suspension stuff, and I started digging and went down the rabbit hole, and I learned something new, and I wanted to share it with you because this relates to a mod I did to this car previously, was the H&R springs. So give me a second, I'm gonna go grab the H&R springs. All right, so I'm back. Got the spring here, the front spring. Figure you don't need to see the rear spring, it's just skinnier and taller. One thing I learned recently was that these springs have dead coils, and I was like, what is a dead coil? If you guys remember from my install video or when I took them off or whatever, let me see if I can remember to find it. I'll put a picture of it here. And I was talking about in that video how I didn't like how the springs would sit on each other and they would hit. Basically, I wasn't educated. I didn't know what a dead coil was. I didn't understand the concept. I didn't understand really how the spring works. And I wanted to share that because maybe some of you guys don't understand that. So if you guys can see, let me get closer to the camera, you guys can see. So if you can see this right here, see how I can squeeze this by hand easily with my own bare hands. And they compress real easy. Now if I tried to squeeze these upper parts, I really can't squeeze it at all. But the lower part, they compress very easily. That is a dead coil. And I was like, well, what's a dead coil? Dead coil, they probably use some other term, but this is what I read on the forum, on multiple forums. The reason they have a dead coil is when this is in the car, this is 3,000 pounds. I'm 200 pounds. So if I can squeeze this, I'm like, oh, this spring is pretty weak. So at 3,000 pounds, when these three come together, the top one doesn't touch it. These two touch. Actually, all three of these, I think, touch when the car is compressed. It's by design because the car is going to sit lower, so the spring is shorter. But right now, see how they're expanded? And the reason for that is, if it didn't expand and my arm is the shock, when you would hit a bump, it would do that, and then the spring could rattle around, and you would lose your alignment. You might lose control of your car. It would be bad. These dead coils are designed so that when your shock is in there and it's compressed under the car's weight, but you hit a bump and it expands, the spring and shock stay together as one unit. They don't, and they move together. The spring doesn't move independently. And that's for safety, for alignment, and for performance. So pardon my ignorance. For anybody out there that I've given misinformation to, I didn't know. I didn't know there was such a thing as a dead coil, and I did not understand the design of this. I've spoken to H&R and other people, and yeah, that's exactly how this is designed. So there's actually nothing wrong with these H&R springs. These springs are in perfect condition. I thought maybe I got the wrong part number for my car, and I've looked it up and I've researched it, and this is the correct part number for the 9972 with PASM. The spring is designed to work with the PASM suspension, so I don't need to replace the shocks or anything like that, which led me down to another thinking. So because I had this, and when I installed these last, remember, I installed these on OEM parts, OEM shocks and springs. Since I installed these originally, and then I went back to the original springs, I have replaced the shocks, the control arms, bushing. You know what? It's easier for me to tell you what I didn't replace. I've replaced everything on front and back of the car that has anything to do with the suspension, with the exception of the front sway bar and the inner tie rods. That's the only thing I haven't replaced. I've replaced all the bushings, the sway bar links, the shocks, the upper strut mounts, front and rear. I think I replaced the rear shock twice because I had a leaky one, and I had a pinched PASM cable on one of my fronts. But I replaced all the shocks, all the springs, all the bushings, everything are all replaced. And I haven't installed these springs since I did that. So when I installed these before, I installed them on worn shocks. They weren't worn out, but they were worn because they were old. They were 14 years old. So one thing I also saw with these springs was I thought the car was settled a little too much. That could have been because the shocks were worn, so the car settled down because they couldn't lift the car up. I can tell you, since I've installed these shocks, the car sits higher. So much so that I was like, man, why does my front look lifted? I really noticed with the BBS CHR wheels, because the tires were just a few millimeters taller than these Continental tires. They were the Michelin All Seasons. The tread on them, they're a little bit taller than these, so the front looked a lot higher than I remember. Ride's nice, but it's because the shocks. So what do you think? Are we going to reinstall the H&R springs? I'm leaning towards yes, but I want to see what you guys say in the comments. And second question, if I install these springs, when I replaced all the components, I replaced all the hardware that came with those components. So 95% of all hardware is new. But should I, because they sell this on FCP Euro, should I buy all brand new hardware, and when we do the springs, replace all the hardware also, or are we good to just reuse the hardware? What do you think? Let me know in the comments if we're good to use the hardware. I've read mixed things. I've seen new hardware being reused and not a big deal. One of the things we will do this time though, if you watched my previous video, we struggled, and part of it was didn't have all the right tools. We are going to buy all the special tools and make sure we do this 100% correctly with the right tools. We're not going to jimmy rig anything. We're not going to fabricate or modify something. We want to use all the correct tools. The rear is actually pretty easy. You can use some hand tools. The front, there's a special tool to hold that slotted washer. So you can get that, and there's a special, I found it, a special compressor to compress the spring that works really good if you don't have like a wall mounted compressor or one of those like, you know, $1,000 spring compressors. I found one that completely grabs the springs top and bottom safely. So you can do this very safely, no issues. You don't have to worry about the spring expanding or twisting or binding. So we're gonna buy all the correct tools if we decide to do this. But I wanna read all your comments before, or do we leave the car as is? Because I'm gonna tell you, the way it is right now, it rides great. Let me get out of the picture, you guys look at it. Just driving the car around, the way it sits right now, it's phenomenal. I mean, it sits good. I do like the lowered stance. Lowered stance does look better, but it sits good. I got no issues with the stance right now. It rides really well. I don't use PASM unless I'm gonna get on a twisty road that much because I like the nice softer road. I will tell you that when I had these installed, because they're a little stiffer, not so much, they're not jarring, it's just a little stiffer. On most roads, you don't even notice. On freeways and highways, the car still rides great. You get on a bad road, that's when you notice how much stiffer these are. You get on a bad road that has cracks and potholes and a bunch of other stuff, you definitely notice that these springs are stiffer. And because of that, I don't use the PASM that much when I had these springs on. But it's not a big deal. It's still there. It's still active. So I guess that's the question is, do we install these springs knowing I already have PASM and the car is already 10 millimeters lower than a non-PASM car? Or do we not install them and just be happy with what we got and just ride and put miles on the car? What do you think? Let me know in the comments and we'll let you know in the future what we're gonna do. But that's the next step, is to decide whether we're gonna reinstall these. One other reason I wanna install these springs is, or I'm thinking about installing these springs is, have you seen, how many times have you seen a 930 or 993 with classic car with the classic wheels lower, just sitting really nice, good stance? How sexy those things look, especially like a 993. They just look super, super sexy. And with this car becoming a modern classic and having this nostalgic look, I think lowering again might just give it that extra little bit of sexy that it needs, that it might be missing. So, all right, I have more to come. Not gonna talk about the flight stuff in this video. That'll be a future video. We're gonna separate that. We got have some stuff to talk about in that, but that's not about this video. This is all about the car and what we're gonna do with it. So if you think I sold the car, I apologize. It was a little bit of clickbait on my part, but no, we're not selling the car. We're not selling it yet. Not till the interest rates come down. These interest rates are ridiculous. I will not buy a car right now. And if you don't need to buy a car, don't buy a car. But thanks for watching. Catch you guys later.